Jim Carrey, the pain behind the smile. He was the man who could make the whole world laugh, but behind that wide smile was a story of pain, struggle, and deep emptiness. This is the life of Jim Carrey, the rise, the fall, and the painful truth of a Hollywood legend. Jim Carrey was born in Newmarket, Ontario, Canada, in 1962. His childhood was far from glamorous. His father, Percy Carrey, was a talented musician but struggled to keep a steady job. His mother, Kathleen, was often sick and depressed. And young Jim, the youngest of 4 children, grew up in a house full of financial troubles and emotional battles. When Jim was just a boy, his family became so poor that they lived in a Volkswagen van for a time. He worked as a janitor after school, scrubbing floors to support his family. Yet even in the darkest times, Jim had one gift that never failed him: his ability to make people laugh. In school, he would do impressions of teachers, classmates, even celebrities. Comedy was his escape. It was his shield against the pain of real life. At 15, Jim started performing stand-up comedy in Toronto. His early gigs were brutal. He was booed off stage, mocked, and rejected. But he refused to quit. He knew he was destined for something greater. He once wrote himself a check for $10 million for acting services rendered and dated it for 1995. He kept that check in his wallet as a reminder of the life he wanted. Slowly, Jim climbed the comedy ladder. In the late 1980s, he moved to Hollywood and landed a role in health. He admitted that money and fame did not bring happiness. In interviews, he confessed that he felt empty, that life felt meaningless, even at the peak of success. In 2015, tragedy struck when his former girlfriend, Catriona White, died by suicide. The media frenzy that followed dragged Jim into a storm of lawsuits, accusations, and heartbreak. It was one of the darkest chapters of his life. The once unstoppable comedian disappeared from Hollywood, retreating into isolation and art. Yes, art. Jim found solace in painting. His large, colorful portraits and emotional canvases became his therapy. He also turned to philosophy, reading spiritual texts, and questioning the very meaning of identity and fame. The rise of Jim Carrey was meteoric, but his fall was painful. He fell into darkness. But he continues to remind the world that joy is not in money or fame, but in truth, in love, and in finding yourself. And that is why Jim Carrey will always remain a legend. But his story doesn't end there, because Jim Carrey is not just remembered for his movies. He is remembered for the way he challenged the very meaning of success. In Hollywood, fame is everything. Red carpets, flashing lights, million-dollar contracts. These are seen as the ultimate goals. Jim had all of that. He was once the highest paid actor in the world. Yet at the height of it all, he stood up and said something shocking. "I wish everyone could get rich and famous, so they would realize it's not the answer." That one sentence revealed the truth he had discovered. Fame and money don't cure the emptiness inside. They don't heal the pain of depression, and they don't guarantee happiness. In his later years, Jim began stepping away from the Hollywood machine. He appeared less on screen and more in interviews where he spoke about life, spirituality, and the search for meaning. Some people thought he sounded strange, others thought he sounded wise. But one thing was clear: Jim Carrey was no longer chasing movies. He was chasing peace. He turned to painting and drawing. His studio became his sanctuary. Large, colorful, emotional portraits filled his walls. For him, art was not about money or fame. It was about expression, about putting his feelings into colors and lines when words were not enough. At the same time, Jim began to inspire people not just with comedy, but with wisdom. He talked about living in the present moment, about not being trapped by the ego, about how identity is just a mask, and behind that mask, there is something much reflection of themselves. The man who once made them laugh was now making them think. And yet, Jim never abandoned his gift of humor. Even in interviews where he spoke about pain, he would still crack a joke, still pull a funny face, still remind the world that laughter is medicine. Because for Jim Carrey, comedy was not just a career, it was his way of surviving. In recent years, he returned to acting for a few special projects, like Sonic the Hedgehog. His energy, his creativity, his wild characters reminded fans that the old Jim was still there. But the difference was clear. Acting was no longer his whole life. He had found a balance between fame and inner peace. The rise of Jim Carrey showed us how high talent can take you. The fall of Jim Carrey showed us the cost of living in the spotlight. But his rebirth, as an artist, a thinker, a seeker, shows us something even greater. That life is not about how much you achieve, but how deeply you understand yourself. Jim Carrey once said, "Your need for acceptance can make